Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And today I'm going to be making a pixel art movie poster and sort of attempting to capture some of those typical visual beats that you tend to see in movie posters, like where there's sort of a collage style arrangement of characters and elements being at different scales, and also, trying to pull references from the movie to tuck into the background. And all the while, obviously trying to make all these ideas work in a pixel art style. Now, the movie that's the subject for today is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which coincidentally is celebrating its 25th anniversary at the time that I'm making this. I saw this anniversary coming up, and I felt like I needed to do something big for this one, because this movie, this was huge for me, honestly. I mean, I was a kid when it came out, and it really just hit me right in the demographic, like right at that spot. They really did a good job getting a whole new generation of kids, like, basically indoctrinated into Star Wars fandom before this, because prior to the Phantom Menace, like, we already had the OT special edition movies, and there was like the 90s Power of the Force toys and all that. And so by the time they dropped this movie, it felt like it almost was a surprise or a coincidence that there was a whole new Star Wars, and I just ate it up. I mean, quite literally too. We're talking like I had fruit snacks. But there's also, the action figures, the Lego. At one point, for some reason, I had a Darth Maul chair, like an inflatable Darth Maul chair, because that's not terrifying or problematic. But probably the best thing, and this is in retrospect, is that I wasn't even aware of other people's opinions about the movie. Not really until much later, after reading things online or whatever. And those were the dark times, Phantom Menace fans. And there are dozens of us, by the way. But Phantom Menace fans, we had to go into hiding for quite some time, lest we be criticized for our positivity and inexplicable tolerance of side characters. And I do get it, I really do. But it's been nice to see that in recent years, it feels like there's been a shift in appreciation for the prequel films. And so again, just kind of seeing this anniversary come up, it just felt like it was a good time to take a moment and show some appreciation for something that captured my imagination so strongly, all of those years ago. Now, as far as the technical or pixel art side of things, I've started here on a canvas size of 96 by 144 pixels. So the way I arrived at those specific dimensions was just because that's the same height as the Game Boy screen, and then the width is actually just 2/3 of that to get kind of a reasonable aspect ratio for a vertical poster. So my original thought was just that it'd be cool if, in principle, the poster could actually fit on a Game Boy screen. I just sort of like the idea of trying to pack this much ambition and detail of this like poster scene into a small space like that. Even though I wasn't planning on pursuing like a Game Boy aesthetic for the rest of the visuals or the color or anything. So for now, I'm putting in some of the main character pieces, and I'm not making this up as I go, even if it might look like that. I actually did a rough sketch beforehand just to kind of plan out like where everything was going to go. So the main idea here is that there's sort of loosely like a light side that depicts the Jedi and their travel to Tatooine. And then there's a dark side of the poster where we've got Darth Maul and like the Trade Federation ship over Naboo to convey that conflict. And then in the center, of course, is Queen Amidala and Anakin kind of being the two main anchor characters for those locations. And for Anakin, I of course wanted to work in some idea of pod racing into the poster, just because that's such an iconic, element of this movie. So I've got him here in his pod racing helmet, and I thought it'd be interesting to juxtapose that with the Jedi Council below. In the film, the Council is kind of hesitant about whether or not Anakin should be trained. We all know how it ends up, but in those moments, it kind of feels like there are these alternatives to what his fate could have been. Likewise, winning the pod race is the thing that enables him to even leave Tatooine and become a Jedi. So that, as well as another moment where his fate is kind of being decided. So I don't know, there's not like much depth that I was thinking of beyond that. I just really like this visual of the pod race and the Jedi Council being these representations of these moments where his fate was hanging in the balance. All right, well, with some of these new additions here, I'm starting to get the sense that I'm going to be a little bit tight on space when trying to add in the other characters and details. So I'm going to adjust the canvas size, and I'm going to add 8 pixels onto all sides of it. So the new canvas size is now 112 by 160 pixels, which is a relatively small adjustment, but definitely enough just to give a nice bit of breathing room compared to where things were headed. I guess this kind of means the Game Boy screen concept is now over capacity. But I'm alright with that. It was a nice place to have started at least. By the way, my approach here is just to complete everything as line work first, and we'll worry about the color in a little bit. I find, this is like sort of a larger project for me, and it's way easier to digest the workload of something like this when you just stick with a straightforward task like the line art. We can just focus on the clarity and kind of the layout of the raw elements before getting any more complex than that. And most of the time I find, if I'm happy with how a piece looks when it's just line work, chances are it's only going to get better when eventually bringing color into the equation. Placing in some of the smaller line work elements here is kind of funny. So I'm doing this thing where, the characters are at different scales, but then you have things like the Qui-Gon and the Obi-Wan sprites being on the smaller side, and they actually are sizing out to be what you might have for a standard like 16 or 24 pixel tall sprite for a game. So it's just funny there's that difference in fidelity compared with those larger portraits that are already in there. But that's kind of neat, I suppose. It's maybe some of the charm of doing a poster in a pixel art style. One of the last things we need to add in here is the title and the tagline for the poster. And I've got a head start on that by grabbing just the actual movie logo, and I scaled it down into this canvas size. But you can see again that I'm running short on space here. Now I could make the lettering smaller, but it doesn't really look like it'll take too much to get it to fit. So once again, I'm just going to make a small adjustment to the canvas size and increase just the height from 160 to 168 pixels. And this will just give that little bit of extra height to make the lettering fit nicely. Now for the title, what I'm doing is tracing out from that reference layer. It's a bit of a cheap move, I guess, but I was concerned just about capturing any little bits of accuracy that I could still hold on to. For the smaller bits of lettering though, I kind of settled into a comfortable single color 3x5 block style lettering that doesn't exactly match those originals, but it works well for kind of leaning it into the pixel art side of things. Getting any fancier than this basic lettering doesn't seem like it would even fit, because the 3x5 letters just barely made the cut for the top tagline to fit across. In fact, if we hadn't already increased the canvas size that first time, I don't think this would have fit at all. And, that probably should have been something to consider when sizing this out initially, but either way, I'm glad it kind of worked out as it did. All right, and the final step here is going to be the color, which feels like it'll be a lot, but, having done that plain line work, it kind of leaves us in this spot where it's almost like a coloring book page that we can just fill in. So generally, I find this to actually be a pretty relaxing stage of the whole thing. To get started, I'm going to put some black bars behind the lettering and kind of pop those titles out in a yellowy, orangey color. And my goal for the main illustrated portion is going to be to have like a burst of color at the center that sort of fades away into darker colors and eventually merges with the black near the lettering. So to begin, I'm going to blob in this giant mass of purple behind the entire illustration. And this is the darkest color in the palette, so it kind of represents that tailing edge that's going to fade off into the black. From here, I'll layer in blobs of progressively brighter colors to generate this sort of like bursting color fade that originates at the center and fades out at the edges. You'll notice I've stuck with the warm like red and orangey hues on the left and the cooler blue hues on the right. And that was to further convey this idea of like the light and the dark sides of the poster, each having like a different color temperature. Although when you think about it, like the Jedi, usually have blue lightsabers and the Sith have red, so that is a little bit reverse logic, but from a temperature perspective, I think it makes sense, with Tatooine being on the left side. Anyway, I'll just turn the line work layer off for a second and you kind of see like what I did here. This is just sort of an abstract, like cloudy application for now. I'll do a bit more to shape it and kind of make the edges fade off with some dithering in the end. But for now, it's just giving us some direction on how the background and the foreground are going to fit together. For the next phase of coloring, I'm going to go through and fill in all the appropriate character colors and just do a bit of shading along the way as well. I've kept the color palette relatively small for this because I wanted to lean into that low fidelity look, just like with how it's a low resolution as well. And I put these colors together ahead of time just to give myself a bit of a head start for this. The basis for these colors actually come from a Mario sprite that I did recently. And that one was a bit of an experiment in trying to achieve a complex look that only uses a small number of colors. And the way that Mario sprite was able to be so efficient like that was that both the red and the teal were able to share the same purple tone as their shade color. And likewise, the off-white highlight kind of works for both as well. Now, when I think about the Phantom Menace and the look of that movie, I sort of associate it with the colors red, yellow, and blue. I feel like those are the ones that pop up a lot in the designs and the costuming of the film. So I made some edits to that Mario palette and worked out this structure where it's got like the off-white at one end, and then it can basically kind of step through either the warm or the cool tones, and then both of those land back into the same purple shade tone on the darker end. So overall, this works nicely just in terms of pixel art palette efficiency. And then on the visual side of things, it ends up feeling really cohesive and easy to have everything kind of sit together and blend relatively well because of this structure. One thing to keep in mind though is that, we still don't want certain visual elements to get lost in the background. So for a few of these pieces, I'm adding these lighter outlines to help them pop out a little bit. And, since there are a few steps of color at play here, it doesn't always have to be white outlines for this sort of thing, but just something that's going to provide a little bit of visual separation so it can kind of help things like not get swallowed up into this sea of crazy colors. So with all that coming together, let's go take a look at the final pixel art movie poster for The Phantom Menace. Here we go.
I have a bad feeling about this. At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have
Funny little boy. I'm a person. My name is Anna.
What, you think you're some kind of Jedi?
I'm a pilot. And someday I'm gonna fly away from this.
You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short.
Always true. Dear Lord. No more. No less.
All right, well, there we have it. I may have gone too far in a few places, so to speak. But that's what it's all about, isn't it? Honestly, it was a lot of fun preparing like all the different size assets for this and figuring out the layout. I had a lot of fun, working with the themes in that. And it was also nice, to revisit episode 1 again for its anniversary. So we'll close out with some CRT time. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square. And may the force be with you.